Yo, what's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop stream for the Sony Open, which is our first event of 2026. Normally would be event number 2, but no Tournament of Champions this year, and going to get you ready for all of your exposure this week. So I missed you guys. It's been over a month since we last had a live stream on this channel. So, was able to spend some time with family. That was nice and whatnot, but back to what we love doing here on the channel. So any questions, any player deep dives that you got for me, feel free to hit me up in the live chat. If you just want to see hi down there as well, that helps us out with the algorithm. Also, smash that like button, subscribe if you guys haven't as well. That also helps boost up those numbers, and hit me up with anything that you're curious about for this week. But that's going to include a full breakdown of the DFS side, and then a prop and betting breakdown towards the second half of this live stream. But we'll touch on the weather, ownership for DFS, lineup construction from that aspect as well. And then for props or betting, we'll talk through conditions, prop value on Underdog and PrizePicks, as well as a slip that you guys can tail over there too, and even a matchup for round number 1. So as you guys can tell, we have a ton to go through here. We don't fuck around here on the channel. We get straight to the business. So let's hop on into it. We got Jose in the chat, C. Floyd as well. A lot of the regulars coming back for 2026. You'd love to see it. Patrick Hooves down there as well. It says Merry New Year. That's a good way to kind of combine all those together. Same to you out there as well, my guy. We got Mr. R. Klein down there, Steven Lebowitz, also Jay Bonzo. The whole crew coming back together. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic week so far, and hopefully it'll only get better over the weekend. But let's hop on in. I'll say hi to the rest of you guys when we get to the questions a little bit later on. But let's start with a look at the golf course, which we're not going to completely go over the golf course again. I've got a golf course breakdown. Heck, even the DFS breakdown extensively talks about what to expect here. But what I do want to circle back to is the weather for the first couple of days, because it's going to change how this golf course plays. On top of having slightly longer rough this year, that is something that we've heard from a few of the players already in some interviews. It's going to be extremely windy for Thursday and Friday, and we're not even talking about the waves yet, so let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. But in terms of just regular weather for the first couple of days, you're talking about close to 15 miles an hour sustained, time when there's going to be close to 25 to even 30 mile an hour wind gusts, and it's the same thing for Friday as well. In fact, the weather further deteriorates the further we go into the weekend. So circling back to the golf course and what's going to be important at Waialae Country Club, I think around the green, out of that sticky Bermuda grass, is going to be a lot more important than what we typically see here. And last year, it was a quote-unquote an around the green year at this golf course, and that's going to be further boosted here in 2026. So around the green stats, last 12, last 24 rounds could be something that you look at. But if you really want to cater it for what this golf course is going to reward, look at the around the green stats that they have on Bermuda grass. And whether it's with my stats, my modeling this week, that's something that I'm incorporating to my projections, or even on sites like BetTheNumber here on their custom modeling, they've got an around the green Bermuda tab to go out there and further research it. I think it's worth at least 5, maybe even 10 minutes of your time to go through and see who really excels on that surface. So just something to throw out there, maybe a slightly harder Sony Open than what we typically see. Birdie or better percentage, perhaps a little bit less important this year. And maybe that's where you can grab some of those weights and then put it further towards that around the green play, and then maybe slightly less putting as well. If it's going to be a little bit more of a ball striking fest in these tougher conditions, then you could slightly de-emphasize some of those putting stats and then add them to the around the green, as I was saying there. But when we take a look at the waves for the first couple of days, I also think that we could have a little bit of an edge brewing, because if we take a look at Thursday morning as opposed to Thursday afternoon, and let me get a sip of this Mexican Coke that we have here. Definitely tastes better with the real sugar in it, but my throat's getting a little scratchy. So just 1 second here while I'll go ahead and take care of that. It's been a month, so we'd expect a little bit of rust with doing these live streams. But as you can see, with the morning versus the afternoon here, it's a little bit lower with the sustained winds, especially for the first 3 or so hours. But the wind gusts, rather than being close to 25 miles an hour in the afternoon, they're closer to 12 to maybe 20 miles an hour as they're approaching midday. So I would expect that to lead to some sort of advantage for round number 1. So if you're playing showdown lineups for the first day, do stack the first half of tee times. But because Friday looks so flat when we go to the second day of action, I think that even over the first couple rounds, it could be a half a stroke to a stroke advantage. And we don't want to ignore that sort of thing, especially if you're 150 max sort of player. So with my personal lineup construction, I'm taking I think it was 27.5% of my lineups that I went towards only AM, PM wave players to try and take advantage of those conditions tomorrow morning, where it's a little bit calmer than what it'll be in the afternoon. And then I'll just hopefully hold on there on Friday afternoon, because on Friday, I don't think it matters when you're going to tee off. It's going to be extremely difficult. But tomorrow afternoon, especially towards the late afternoon tomorrow, so I would say the later the PM tee times are probably impacted even a little bit more than some of those early afternoon tee times. I mean, look at those wind gusts, close to 26, 27 miles an hour, sustained winds that are even getting close to 20 miles an hour there as well. And if we take a look at some of the other models, they're all nasty. In fact, some of the other ones are even more severe towards that PM wave tomorrow. There would be about a 15 to even a 20 mile an hour wind gust split from morning to afternoon on that one. If we went to the Icon model, it's calling for a similar type of story. GFS, ECM, you name it, they're all pretty much in agreement here, which is why I'm willing to take 25 to 30% of my lineups and fully stack them in that sort of direction. But, 25 to 30% is far from all of my lineups in my portfolio. I'm still going to have 75 to 70% of my lineups to work with without that sort of a lineup construction change. However, when I'm actually building my player pool for a week like this, I'm also siding towards some of those AM, PM guys a little bit more. And in particular with my plays in the 6 and 7K range, where it's slapdicks, players that are harder to get through the cut line, any sort of an edge that we can generate on players towards the bottom end of the board is going to be even more impactful than what we have towards the top. Like, it wouldn't surprise us that much if we had guys on the quote unquote bad side of the draw, especially 8, 9, 10K players that still were able to top 10, top 5 out of that bad wave. It'd be a little bit more surprising to see that from somebody that, has maybe one top 10 over the last year is like $6,500. Those players I want from the right side of the draw. So on my player pool, if you guys are a member of my Patreon page, we have that here for 2026 as well. A golf DFS tier. It's how you guys get access to all my tools, which speaking of, we're actually going to bring up those tools right now. We're going to talk extensively through ownership across the board. But if you guys see my player pool for this week, you'll see that it's probably 65% guys on the AM PM wave. And I don't have an exact count on that. In fact, as the week has gone on, I got even more correlated towards that side of things. So it might even be closer to a 70-30 split now that we're here on a Wednesday. But either way, that's where I went out there and broke all of my ties. And I'm even going out there and forcing them in for full 6-0 stacks. So that's the weather, at least for the first couple days. I think round one showdown could be a bit of an edge if you stack those early starters as well. But the even bigger edge when it comes to playing PGA DFS, guys, comes from the ownership angle. And that's why you'll hear a lot of touts talk about ownership the entire week until you're pretty much bleeding out of your ears, because this is the hardest sport to predict. So there's more variance involved, a lot more chaos involved with a PGA DFS slate. And if you're not accounting for that ahead of time, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because there are always going to be players that are getting a lot more steam than their peers. And you're going to have to figure out whether they're worth the squeeze, whether they're worth playing at 50 to even 60% exposure in your player pool to get close to that 2x leverage mark. And for example, with the Russell Henley, that's 34.8% owned. If you're using the 2x leverage rule as your rule of thumb for building your player pool, that is 70% exposure that you have to be willing to get get a full 2x leverage there. And I'll say he is a core play for me. It's not somebody I'm betting outright, but somebody I do have a lot of confidence in for this sort of event. I have nowhere close to 70% exposure. So I'm not somebody that will marry myself to that 2x rule, in particular for some of these players towards the top end of the board. But the point being is the higher the ownership you're getting on one of these players like a Russell Henley, the harder it is to get over the field and to take a stand versus what the rest of the field is doing, which is why a low ownership number on a player is a good thing in most cases. And that's not to say that you want to have all 0.1 percenters in your lineup. All guys are in the 6K range, for example, because you're going to get smoked by the rest of the lineups. But in moderation, especially if you can find a top tier play that is being overlooked by the rest of the field, that's the biggest edge that you can find on PGA DFS. And in Showdown, when it's only an 18-hole sample size as opposed to 72 holes like we have here for the main slate like we're covering right now, that variance and that chaos is ramped up even more. So if you're playing that round one Showdown slate, I would try and make your lineup as ugly as you possibly could and only go after those AM guys, as I was saying before, from the Showdown side. But let's talk through ownership at the top. Any sort of player pool deep dives, feel free to go ahead and throw those in the chat as well. After we go through all the ownership from 8K plus, I'm going to circle back to the chat one time more, and we're going to go through all the deep dives that you've got. It's, some weeks there's only a couple deep dives that we have to go through. I have a sneaking suspicion because it's the first week of the year that we're going to have quite a few to go through. But the one thing about this channel is that we don't skip any questions. The only questions that we'll skip will be repeats or ones that are maybe silly in the chat that we don't want to read out loud. But you guys get the idea. We're going to go through all the comments. We're going to take all the time that we need to go through what you guys are curious about. So now is the time for that. Any players that you guys want to go through the shots gain metrics on, feel free to let me know. And by the way, the sheet that we're going through right now is from my Patreon page. And these are the tools that I was talking about before. So obviously my player polls here towards the left. A lot of this is blacked out as I have to keep those for my members. It's not valuable if I'm just handing it out to everyone, of course. So I do have to keep those somewhat concealed for the people that are paying for the tools that I have. But we've got shots gained metrics to go through, last 24 rounds, also the last 12 rounds at our disposal. We're going to have course history. That's for Waialae Country Club over the last 5 seasons that they've played here. Recent form, so that's for the fall swing, the last 8 events that we have recorded there. And we can also go through projections, modeling, all of that kind of fun stuff. So just feel free to let me know those players in chat. But outside of a Russell Henley, the ownership up top is pretty spread out until we get down to a JJ Spawn. So you can see a Griffin's getting a little bit of steam at like 22%, but Morikawa, Hideki, even a Robert McIntyre are in that 17 to 19% range, only a 2% differential from your highest to your lowest owned player. So I would say that out of these 5, you kind of just play your dudes. Like there's not really anyone that you can get cute with, at least in the large field GPPs. I think if anyone's going to get squeezed in this range, it might be a Hideki Matsuyama because of that weather wave, because he's the only PM wave player that we have here towards the top end of the board. So, people are getting sharper with their DFS process. We're not going to be the only ones that are looking at the weather heading into Thursday and Friday lock. So I would say if anyone's going to moonwalk out of these top 5 players, shout out to my guy GGen75 always talking about the players moving back with the ownership or moonwalking, as he used to say. He's probably the candidate for that, just because there are so many AM guys scrunched around him. But the mega chalk outside of Henley is going to be a JJ Spawn, who, if you guys watched our preview on Monday, you guys know I absolutely love this week. And if there's a spot to still play your guys despite the ownership, that's going to be in the 9 and 10K range, because you're talking about the best players that we have in the field. We're not talking about slapdicks in the 6 and 7K range that are lucky to even make 40% of their cuts this year. Guys like Russell Henley, JJ Spawn might miss like 4 to 5 cuts the entire season. And that would probably be a bad season from that perspective, because they're making 80% plus of their cuts, especially in some of these smaller field events. And JJ Spawn, he finished 3rd in this event last year, a really good course history guy, also another top 12 finish sandwiched on top of that. Takes apart these Bermuda grass tracks, also the more short positional golf courses. So I'm still using them despite that ownership. And in that preview on Monday, we knew that these 2 players were going to be getting that sort of steam. And that's kind of how I handle the chalk up top. If there are players that are obvious values that I know I want to play on a Monday, I'll play them no matter what the ownership looks like when we get to a Wednesday like this. However, if Russell Henley, JJ Spawn weren't core plays for me, if they weren't players that I wanted to flag plant as soon as I saw the pricing, then they wouldn't be players in my player pool. So for example, Ben Griffin, I had to think twice about playing, but him on the AM side of the draw, also his form during the last end of the year, kind of hard to avoid there. But like a Siwoo Kim on the wrong side of the draw, getting 22% ownership, like that was enough for me to get off of that sort of a play. So that's where the weather edge is coming in. That's where the ownership is starting to dictate your process. And these sort of, things that we're going through here together are the things that you should be thinking about when building your player pool as well. You need to be, weighing the pros and cons to getting to certain plays, whether on the right or the wrong side of the draw, their upside, whether they can actually top 5 or win this event, because for a 9, 10K range player, we need a top 5, at the very least a top 10 to be able to get to that optimal lineup. And there are players up here that are much more suited for top 20 finishes than what they are for that top 5 and top 10 equity. So in large field GPPs, which is where I play a vast majority of my exposure, I'm looking for those guys that have that top 5 and top 10 upside. And, a Henley and a Spawn, especially at this sort of golf course, have that. It makes them players that I just can't avoid. But when we get down to this 9 and 8K range, the ownership isn't spread out that much. Like there's not that much what I would call polarization with the ownership. Polarization means that the high owned guys get higher owned and the lower owned guys get even lower owned. That's what a high level polarization would mean. The polarization in this 8, 9K range this week is relatively low. Like your quote unquote high owned guys would be a Keegan Bradley at 14.9%. There's one low-owned player, I guess, with a Keith Mitchell who's 4.3% owned. But like most of your low-owned guys from 8K plus that we're about to go through are like 7 to 8% owned at the very least. So that's not even double the ownership. Like if you doubled these guys at 7 to 8%, that would just get you up to guys like a Keegan Bradley's ownership. A lot of times we see a lot of these guys that are closer to 4 to 5% owned in this 8K range, and you're just not seeing that on this sort of a weekend. Maybe that's because of the lack of form. We don't have a lot of recent golf tournaments to look at, a lot of recent results that are going to make players overly chalky, and the pricing is pretty solid too. It's a deep field. There's a lot of really solid golfers to choose from, and there's a lot of players in the 8K range this week in terms just of raw players to choose from. It's more than what we typically have on this sort of a slate, and because of that, you kind of just play your guys here as well. Like even some of the guys that you can get quote unquote cute with that are 9 to 10% owned, is it really that much differentiation compared to taking a Keegan Bradley that's 15% owned? The answer is no. It's not that big of a difference from going from a 10% owned player up there to a 15% owned player. So just like the 9 and 10K range, if there are players down there that are getting a little bit of steam this week, but you liked them on a Monday, like don't shy away from them. And I know we went over a couple outright bets on our Monday preview. That was Matt McCarty and Nico Echeverria, 55 to 1, by the way, on Echeverria. I got 66 to 1 on McCarty this week, 2 of my top 6 model ranking plays. So they were kind of no brainers for me to get to. But I love Keegan Bradley at this golf course. I bet him at 25 to 1. My betting card, by the way, is 9 players deep. And if you guys want to get my my entire betting card for this week, also any matchups, that'll be on the betting and prop side this year. A little bit different than in the past. In the past, I had included outrights with DFS, which, now to come to think of it, was just silly, right? It doesn't really go together whatsoever. Not all DFS players are bettors, but a lot of people that are betting props on Underdog and PrizePicks are betting those outrights. So if you guys want to tail the entire outright card this year, again, there's 9 names on my card. The place to find that would be on the prop and the betting tier. But guys like a Keegan that are getting the ownership and are close to 15% owned, I'm not shying away from because I really like him. And that's even on the wrong side of the draw. So I think that he's somebody that I really wanted to point out to you guys because I'm not completely on the AM PM wave. And anytime somebody in the industry talks about a weather advantage, I feel like people sometimes go way too deep into the weeds when it goes to trying to quote unquote take advantage of it. Even when a weather edge is like a stroke and a half difference, guys, there's normally 1 to 2 players from the wrong side of the draw that still get there. And with the edge that we're looking at this week, it's a half a stroke to maybe a stroke advantage, in my opinion. There's a lot of room for guys like a Keegan Bradley to still get there. And the players that have a much better chance of getting through those slightly harder conditions are your players here towards the top end of the board. So ownership, that wave edge is something that you should be using in your process, but it doesn't mean that you automatically blacklist people because they're on the wrong side of the draw or because they're getting a little bit of extra ownership. They are factors that you should be looking at, but I think that's a good example of when it's not always the end-all be-all. Let's go down to some of the other guys that are getting ownership. That would include a Corey Connors at 14.4%, and then an Aaron Rise, actually the chalkiest player that we have in the 8K range at 17.7%. And I wanted to go ahead and put him down as a cash play so I can show you guys the kind of different players that I'm getting to towards the top end of the board. And Aaron Rye is somebody I also bet outright this week. So I know I said I was only going to give one more, but I bet Aaron Rye this week at 40 to 1 because he's a really good wins player. He's an accurate player off the tee, and he's really good from 150 yards and in. So somebody like Aaron Rye who's getting that kind of ownership, I understand why he's getting it. Like, he's the perfect narrative play for this week. He's the perfect course fit from the stat perspective as well. So that's why he's getting a lot more steam than the guys around him, which doesn't mean that he's completely unplayable. Maybe he is unplayable if you're somebody that's in the large show GPPs and that already has some chalk in their lineups, like I do with a Henley and a Spawn towards the top. But if I'm playing in a cash lineup, where it does not matter if I'm duplicating myself, it does not matter how much leverage I have in that sort of a format, I love guys like Aaron Rye this week. And that's why I don't think your player pool should be rigid. It should be only built and then you use the same player pool for every type of contest that you're entering. That is silly. That is just as silly as me only betting the guys I put down as core plays last year, right? That's why we're making that difference this year. And I'm separating the DFS and the props because the thought process is not the exact same. And your thought process for the large field contest, as opposed to what you're doing in your 50-50s and head-to-heads, should not be the same. So you should not have the same player pool for those sort of a contest. And whether that means that you need to have guys marked down as cash plays that you're also using in cash, or a completely different player pool for your cash lineups, do what's best for you. And on the flip side of things, I started to incorporate this year, but I'm also marking guys down as GPP plays. So obviously for the showdown process, if you guys were following us in 2025, for showdown, we have a very intentional process for getting to all the plays. Ball striking poppers, short game regression candidates, high upside players. If you've watched the streams before, you know what I'm talking about. We're starting to incorporate that on the main slate side now because not every play is the same. And I think Chris Gotterup is the exact opposite of what we have with Aaron Rai. When you think of good course fits, you don't think of Chris Gotterup. Gotterup's a bomber. Gotterup's somebody that can overpower a golf course, especially with that driver. However, you know what Chris Gotterup's also really good at flighting the golf ball. And you know where he won most recently on tour? Oh, and an extremely windy Scottish Open. So if it's going to be really tough conditions over the weekend, don't sleep on that aspect of a Chris Gotterup's game. And while he's maybe not a prototypical course fit like an Aaron Rai, look at the difference in ownership. It's about half the ownership is what you're getting on an Aaron Rai, which is why I'll take on some of that risk. Maybe he's a lower floor play because of some of that spraying it off the tee. But let's say that he clubs down a little bit more off the tee, he hits some fairways. He's a great second shot player. He's a pretty good putter on this Bermuda surface as well. Could easily get the job done at like half that ownership there. So that's another example of where you can get to those pivots and where your player pool should differ depending on the contest that you're entering. And a few other notes, Rico Hoey getting some steam. He was the best player during the fall swing. I do have to say that the track record of these guys that killed it during the fall swing is not very great when they start back at the very next year. So maybe just something to keep an eye on there. He is on the right side of the draw, though. So if you want to use him, I couldn't blame you too much. His ball striking stats were just otherworldly. And then Nico Echevarria, who was one of the players that we talked up on Monday, an outright bet that I played at 55-1. I thought he was going to be like 20% owned in large field GPPs. I thought everyone and anyone was going to be using him, but look at it. He's only 12.5% projected owned. He is number 3 in my modeling, as we mentioned on Monday, but it's the same ownership as a Rico Hoey. So if he's going to be somewhat kept in check, I mean, even a Brian Harmon who's not playing his best golf right now is a little bit over 10% owned. It's another example of where you just play your guys. If you really liked them on a Monday and you were willing to have that conviction to bet them outright, then I don't think you should be shying away from them just because they're a little bit higher owned than their peers. So that's the ownership talk towards the very top end of the board. Of course, guys, for all the ownership for every single player that's teeing it up, you guys can find that on the Patreon page, like I was saying before. Link in the description of the video to go out there and join. The tiers are a bit different for 2026. So if you were somebody that was a part of the channel for 2025, make sure you either upgrade your membership or check out the new tiers for 2026 before going out there and doing so. But on there is where you guys can download this spreadsheet as my entire player pool, all these different tools that we've used throughout the live stream so far. And now let's go through some of your questions that you've got in chat. And a couple other things I do want to throw out there just before we go through those questions in chat were a couple examples of players that I'm using towards the bottom end of the board. One example would be a David Ford. David Ford is on the right side of the draw, and something that is really a priority for me because of the kind of weather edge that we're looking at is taking guys on that AM PM wave in that 6K range. And not only that, David Ford is number 8 in the field in recent form ranking. So I had a feeling that he might get some ownership this week because of the fact that he was popping so much in the metrics that I'm looking at, but 2.1% owned. It's a little bit higher owned than some of the guys around him, but it's far from overly chalky at this portion of the field. So give me some David Ford, give me some Cam Davis towards the bottom end of the board as well. And the last time that they played this event in really tough conditions, that was back in 2020 when Cam Smith won at -11. A lot of times it's close to -20, even lower than -20, that they went in this in calm conditions. You know who else finished in the top 20 that year and was extremely young and new to the PGA Tour? Cam Davis did. And when we think of Cam Davis, we don't think of him as like a hard course grinder, but take a look at a lot of his top 10 finishes over the last few seasons. It's been shorter, more positional golf courses. I mean, when you think of Cam Davis, you think of a wide open, long hitter course. That's normally where a lot of people want to play a Cam Davis, but he's had a lot of success at these more positional golf courses as well. So on the right side of the draw, only 1.7% owned. He's only $6,300. And if you want to go to a double spend up or even a triple spend up, 3 guys that are 9K plus, he gives you the kind of flexibility to be able to pull that off and not have to play another guy in the 6K range. You essentially take care of all that ownership flexibility with just one player alone. But what do you see with these players now low? Not chalk, right? They're all relatively low owned. They're on the right side of the draw, and they've got some sort of a rhyme and reason for getting to them. And this is something I'm always, kind of giving people crap for when we go through our showdown streams, but don't be picking names out of a hat. I know PGA DFS is tough. I know it's chaotic and, it's tempting sometimes to just randomly throw guys into lineups. We've got 120 players to choose from. there are so many different options to go through on a slate like this that you don't need to pick names out of a hat, right? As long as you have a couple metrics or a couple things you're looking for in players to try and get to them, you can easily round off a player pool. And, I have a lot more time than most people to go through the research, go through the weeds, and figure out who the heck I'm going to play. So my player pool is larger. It's 40 plus players on a week like this, and players that I'm all convicted behind. I have rhyme and reasoning for getting to every single player that I'm getting to. But let's say you're a 20 max player and you need to find 16 to 20 guys to use in your player pool. Just be very intentional about those 15 to 20 guys. Even your guys in the 6 and 7K range, try and find some sort of shots gained metric that is putting you onto them, some sort of course history. I mean, it could be anything. We talk about a lot of different things on Showdown for building a player pool, whether it's ball striking, short game, a high upside, players that are good on that sort of a putting surface. By the way, putting isn't just good for Showdown. You could use that for your main slate process as well. Just have a rhyme and reasoning for getting to all of your plays. That's really the main thing I think that you can do to go out there and improve your process is not just hoping that you're getting it right? Actually going through, putting into work to try and find your plays of the week is going to pay off in the long term. So to start going through some of those questions afterwards, we're going to do some lineup construction stuff. So if you guys want to see a lineup put together on DraftKings, stay tuned for that. And then after that is where we're going to go through the prop and the betting side of things. That'll be Underdog and PrizePicks, also some sportsbook stuff, some matchups that I played on Hard Rock Bet. So stay tuned for that a little bit later on too. But let's catch up on chat. I'm assuming that there's a lot to go through, but like I said, that's wonderful. That's why we're back at it. If you guys haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so for me. Let's get this out there. Let's boost the numbers up there and the algorithm there a little bit more. And hit me up with any questions that you've got right now. So let's see where we're at. We have Mike back in the chat as well. Also, Phil, love to see you guys. Also, Go Collect, one of the sweatiest of all the sweaty tryhards. Looking for the first question. Jose likes the Mexican goat, by the way. Speaking of, I need to get a sip myself. It's some pretty good stuff. Another quote from my guy, DGen75. Shout out to the legend. And yeah, we don't play Donkey Chalk except when we do. That's me with Russell Henley this week, man. It's you got me guilty, right? I know DGen would do that at times, and that's what I'm doing this week too. How do we feel about Chris Kirk? So let's talk about my guy Kirky. So Kirk's a really good course fit. He plays Bermuda grass tracks well, and you can't play him at a course that's overly off the tee heavy because he's one of the shorter players, especially at this age. However, he's a dialed iron player, and he's extremely streaky. So what I would say about Kirk is that he started to play really well in the fall swing. However, it was in weaker field events. So is that going to translate now that we have a lot more top tier players up against him? That's where it gets a bit questionable. So the ownership is average. I don't think you have to be worried about that aspect at all. The only worry would be him regressing on the harder side of the draw. So I'd probably put him at like a 5 out of 10. If he was on the right side of the draw, he'd be a 7 out of 10 for me. So really I think that's the main difference in whether he's a good or just an average play on a week like this. But average plays are far from the worst, right? Obviously, you might grade him out a little bit better than I do. And if you've got him as a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10, even on that wrong side of the draw, then he's very usable at 11.4%. So personally, not my favorite player on a slate like this. It's a lot of that is weather-based, but he's been doing a lot of good things over the last few months. And just to show you the shots gained metrics on a Kirky, by the way, the ball striking is what came around on him. He was gaining off the tee, gaining over a half a stroke per round with that approach play, which is very sustainable. So if you were to go to him this week, I couldn't give you too much flack for that. I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're playing Henley, you probably want to avoid playing Spawn in the same lineup. Not necessarily. You still have 4 other players on top of those 2. And towards the top end of the board, they are an extra 5 to 10% ownership apiece. But if you've got 2 sub 5%ers in those other 4 spots, then you're totally fine using those players up top. In fact, just so that I can kind of show you how that would work out, we'll make sure to do that when we're building a lineup together. We'll use those 2 together. We'll kind of force ourselves into a hole with the ownership, and we'll show you how you can get out of that hole with the rest of your lineup construction. So it does put you into a bind, but it's not a bind that you can get yourself. It's a bind that you can get yourself out of, I should say. In a single entry for the whole event, would you lean harder into the Thursday AM wave? Yeah, in my single entry, I have a full 6-0 stack. So I'm only going with one single entry this week. I'm mostly going with my GPP exposure. But yeah, I think that's a reasonable strategy. I think if you only have one lineup, right, I guess that 25-30% might be that just one lineup right there. But yeah, it's something that I'm doing this week. He said, Michael Brennan rates out very well. What do I say? So I like him at courses that are a bit longer off the tee, but he's brand new to tour. So we really don't know that much about his skill set, or at least we don't have a full idea of exactly what courses are going to suit his game. I would say based on what I've seen so far, that at a course that's like 7,500 yards, you're going to have a hard time beating him because he's a good iron player. He obviously hits the ball a mile. That's the one thing that he does that is just extremely obvious when you take a look at his shots gained profile. Hitting the ball super long off the tee isn't something that is super useful at this golf course. So I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10, Alan, and that's despite him maybe not being the best course fit in my opinion. And again, that's just my opinion, right? I obviously have my take on the golf course, but plenty of you guys out there may have a slightly different take on the course. I want the players that are a little bit more positional, but he is so damn good. I mean, you win your first ever, I guess it wasn't his first ever PGA Tour start, but his first PGA Tour start this fall. He goes out there and wins. You can't teach that. It's like Nick Dunlap's won twice, and he's only 22 years old. You can't teach that sort of a pedigree. So yeah, I wouldn't give you too much flack on playing him either. I do think that there will be some better courses for him, though. You're cooking up a two-man slip, taking an over on strokes on McGreevy and Brown. So I like the over on McGreevy. That's something that we actually bet on the Patreon page. And then the over on Dan Brown at 68.5. We'll talk about conditions later on. I'd have to double check the tee time on Brown. But if he's a PM wave tee time and he's going off when conditions are going to be a little bit tougher, I'd be totally fine with a two-leg fade slip like that. In fact, one of the couple slips that I've already entered and that I put on the Twitter was a two-leg fade slip for 2.5x. So I'll give you a little bit more feedback on that when we get to the prop and betting section later, Jose. But yeah, I think the first fade there is great, the McGreevy one, but even that Daniel Brown one might make sense. It's going up. Yob said, what's up, my boy? You're having a fourth son this year. Nice, man. Congrats. I don't know how soon it's coming, but congratulations. That's awesome. You weren't trying to have another, but you don't want to have a vasectomy. I'm not going to read the rest of that, but you're funny, my. He said, anyways, how do I feel about Dunlap? You have $6,500 left, and he seems like the best out of all of that range. So we kind of just talked about Dunlap a bit when we're looking at high pedigree players. If you're in a large field GPP, then maybe you play a Nick Dunlap. If you're in something like a cash lineup or a single entry lineup, then I think you're getting too cute about it because his floor compared to some of the other guys around him is non-existent. I mean, he could literally finish dead last, and it would not surprise me whatsoever. But at the same time, when you're comparing his top 10 equity to a lot of the other players around him, he might have double the top 10 equity of a lot of the other guys around him too. So that's why I say in the large field GPPs that it might make sense to use a Dunlap, but you wouldn't use them in a contest where you're looking for a high floor. So hopefully that answers your question, and congrats on the fourth son. I don't know if that story is entirely true, but you cracked me up either way, my dude. What's going on? Tim, welcome on in. He said you can't play Keegan after what you saw him do with his teeth. Yeah, he does look like a maniac at times, but he played really well in some of the small events we had there in the fall. So I'm personally going to be taking a little sprinkle myself. He said he loved the new setup. Luke, let's go. Thank you, man. Hey, Luke, you should use wave advantage 100% in single entry. I am. Sorry, that's a question, right? You weren't telling me that. You were asking whether you should use it in a single entry. I think it makes a lot of sense too. Even when we have an obvious advantage, by the way, guys, let's say it's like 40 mile an hour winds and then 0 miles an hour on the other side. I can't remember a slate that was that extreme, but even if it was, only so much of the field would fully stack 6-0 in that direction. And I think the biggest that we've ever seen was like 30%. And that was this last year. We had 30% of the field fully stacked 6-0 in some of those large field GPPs. In a slate like this, where it's not an obvious edge, you're talking about 5 to maybe 10% of the field that's fully stacking in that direction. That could be your way that you get your differentiation into your lineup construction as well. So I like that quite a bit, James. Power and Thagala, decent options for single entry contests. I'd say that I like Power a little bit more, but Thagala, now that he looks healthy, is somebody that I really like for 2026. So I'm not going to give you pushback on either player. I would say that Power is probably a little bit safer than Thagala, just because Thagala is only like 2.5 months removed from being injured. So, you know, I hate to put any bad juju out there, but you could obviously get re-injured at any point. That would be the only downside to him this week. Thagala, by the way, I love him in large field GPPs, though. I'm going to have a whole bunch of exposure. In fact, I think it's like 16% that I have in my 150 max this week. Did I get any rounds in with our guy Claim during the offseason? I did not, but I have talked to him a bit. I've heard a few things from the camp. He said, what's the buzz coming into this season? Complete reset. I mean, last year was about as poor as it possibly could have gone. He's played some golf with Scotty. He's played some golf with some of those guys in Texas, like a Jordan Spieth as well. I think he's probably learning a lot from those guys. And he's been way too busy to be down here in South Florida. He's been out of town for a lot of it. But I don't know. We'll see if he can hit that reset done the right way. Because like a Dunlap, I mean, Dunlap was in a slump for a long time too. He sucked, but now he finished 8th his last time out. Is showing some signs of life. You can't teach that talent. So once a player has shown me elite tier talent, top 5, top 10 potential, I will back them even when they start sucking because I know that they'll come out of it eventually. I mean, it's like what happened to Spieth, right? He went through his slump. He came back. Now he got hurt again. He's going into his slump. He'll probably come back out of that again. You can't teach talent. You can't teach winning pedigree like you have with those sort of players. So now I'm playing him this week, but I would keep your expectations low, man. He's like I said, he's hitting the reset button, right? He's trying to figure out what the heck was going wrong. Maybe it's you, but when I click on my Patreon and click see membership details, you only see NFL. Yeah, so you need to hit the little right tab. It's on the right side. There's an arrow, and that'll show you some of the golf tiers towards the right. So valid question. It took me a second to see that as well. What do I think of like a Tom Kim? His form has really fallen off. He is on the right side of the draw, though, so that's a little bit of an added bonus. But Tom Kim at his best plays the short positional golf course as well. You know, winning the Sedgefield, he's Wyndham Championship, winning in Vegas at the Shriners at a shorter positional sort of golf course. I mean, he's played okay at major championships in the past, but really, this is the kind of golf course where if Tom Kim's going to come back and snap back into form, he could top 5 or top 10. But, you know, kind of like a Dunlop, and I hate to put them in the same bucket because he's not as far gone as a Dunlop was by any means, but Tom Kim did not have the best 2025. If he can get back to playing that same kind of golf he was in 2024, he's an absolute steal at sub 3% ownership and in that 7K range. So I'm using him in large GPPs. I think he's an example of a player where you really want to cater your player pool and cater the kind of lineups that you're building for the contest that you're entering. Like you wouldn't want to use him in a cash and single entry lineup as it's bringing on a little bit too much risk. So hopefully that answers your question, but I'm hoping some good things out of Tom Kim this year, man. He's one of the most electric players on the PGA Tour and a whole lot of fun to watch. You said, you're true, you're doing Mayo. Okay. I figured there was some comedy in there too, but that's good to know. Congrats, man. And you said, are you too high on McGreevy and Blanchett? You notice McGreevy has terrible course history. See, let's talk about McGreevy. He's missed a whole bunch of cuts at this event. Him being 10% owned because of some fall series form is a little sketchy to me. In fact, it was sketchy enough to where I really had to think twice about throwing him into my player pool or not. So I think that if you're automatically using him and you're like, oh, regardless of him being super chalky, I'm just going to throw him in there, that maybe that is a little bit too bullish. Like I think you might at least want to think about it before you throw him into your lineups. But Blanchett, I couldn't tell you that much about the kid. I know he's good on the Korn Ferry Tour. Of the players that are coming from the Korn Ferry Tour, he was probably the most consistent of all the guys that are coming over. He had a win in there, but it was a lot of top 5, top 10s, as opposed to other guys that were more like spike finishers, maybe even multiple winners on the Korn Ferry Tour this year. Blanchett, some of those guys that are consistent really translate well to the PGA Tour. Sometimes they're just top 25 machines. They're not guys that are going to top 5, top 10 all that often. We'll have to see. We don't have enough information or shots gained metrics on the kid to really be able to give him his due diligence quite yet. But he is one of the names that I'm really going to be tracking over the next couple of weeks to see what he's showing us, right? Is he an iron player? Is he really good with his wedges? Is he a flusher off the tee? Is he somebody that's a short game specialist? Like these are questions that I have about a Blanchett that I don't have the answers for quite yet. So the answers, at least to me, I don't have enough information on the guy, but we'll be trying to get that over this next month. Ben Griffin for the over at 4.5 birdies. Yeah, we'll go over the prop stuff in maybe another 5 to 10 minutes here from Noah, but I actually like fades a little bit more. So I'll get back to that in a little bit more analysis later, but I'm not the biggest fan on some of those overs on birdies, I'll say. But let's build a lineup together before we truly go into the prop and the betting side of things. And we're going to bring up Draftkings and build a lineup with Henley and JJ Spawn together, because I know we had the question from Zach about whether it was okay to use these two together. It does make it really difficult to get your differentiation into the lineup, but it's not who you play, it's how you play them. And if you're going to go out there and take a couple sub 5%ers with those last 4 spots, you're going to be totally fine in this sort of a lineup. So let's take those two. And this is going to be for the large field GPP, by the way. This isn't even going to be for like a single entry or a contest where we don't have to worry about the ownership as much. We're going to build with these two players in the largest of large field GPPs. So let's go ahead and throw those two together. And then this is where like a Chris Gotterup might make a lot of sense. And I know he's maybe not the perfect course fit as we've already explored before, but he's going to be sub 10% owned. So we'll throw him in there, $8,500. That puts us at about $7,200 remaining for our last 3 spots. And we still don't have any sub 5%ers in here. A sub 10%er is going to help us start to get some differentiation in there. But with this 7K range, we're really going to have to make sure we're not getting onto some of these like 10 to 15%ers. So while I would like to play a Matt McCarty, he is on the wrong side of the draw, but I bet him to win at 66-1. He's a top 6 model ranking play for me this week. So, down in the 7K range, he's just somebody that I can't pass up. However, if I'm playing in a large field GPP and I already have a Henley and a Spawn together, it's probably not a good idea to go and take a 12%er down in that 7K range. So rather than going out there and taking somebody getting that steam, like maybe a Neil Shipley makes a little bit more sense. And I believe he's on the wrong side of the draw. So maybe a Gary Woodland is a better example of a player in this lineup. I believe he is on the AM side and he's also sub 5% owned. But you get a sub 5%er like Woodland in there. And let's try and find one more, another player that's sub 5% that's going to give us some differentiation. Maybe a Tom Kim. I know we just talked about him with a question in the chat. He's sub 5%. He's on the right side of the draw, and he's only $7,000. Now we've got two sub 5%ers, one sub 10%er in there, and then now we have $7,300 for remaining for our last spot. Michael Kim, by the way, is pretty chalky this week. I've got him a little bit over 10% owned. Even if we played Michael Kim in this lineup, you're probably okay in the large field GPP. And that might surprise some of you out there. Some of you might be like, oh, wow, I thought that might be too chalky of a lineup to use. Not really. I mean, if it's a 150,000 entry contest, then yeah, maybe you do want to get off of a Michael Kim there. But if you're talking about like a 20 to a 30,000 entry contest, you're more than likely okay because you have those sub 5%ers in there. So it's not rocket science. And if you really want to make sure you don't duplicate yourself, which is the prudent move in most cases, duplicating is a big no-go for your long-term ROI, then play anyone but Michael Kim. And I guess Ryan Gerard too. Ryan Gerard's also close to 10% out because of his form during the fall swing and his near win on the DP World Tour as well. But it's Sam Stevens, Waialae, Simpson, and Alex Smalley that are in that like 5 to maybe 7% owned range. You use any of those players to cap off this lineup, and you're going to be okay in those large field 150 maxes. So that's an example of that kind of lineup construction. If you're in cash, really it's a whole lot simpler. It's just kind of playing the best plays. So in a cash lineup, I would probably still start with a Henley and a Spawn. By the way, both of them are on the right side of the draw as well. So I think in cash lineups, like they're just kind of like no-brainer plays to get to. But down in this 8K range, rather than going to a Goddard in a cash lineup, like I use an Aaron Rai all day. Aaron Rai is that perfect course fit. He is getting some ownership, but now that we're in a cash lineup scenario here, I mean, excuse my French, but who gives a fuck, right, about the guy's ownership? Like, it literally does not matter when you're playing a 50-50 format. And if you don't know why that's the case, and if you're part of my Patreon page, we can discuss. I can talk about the game theory behind it, but when you only have to finish in the top 50%, it doesn't really matter who the heck everyone's playing. You just want to have a better lineup than 50% of the field. But down to the 7K range, I know we didn't play a Matt McCarty before either, but we can use a McCarty here. Like, I know he's maybe not on the right side of the draw, but he projects so much better than his peers that he's kind of hard to avoid in that range. Maybe I also go up there and throw in Denny McCarthy. He's a really good course fit. Like, you get the idea there. It's just going to the top projecting plays, the top efficiency plays that we have on this sort of a slate, a completely different thought process than the pros and cons and the kind of game theory that we were going through there before. So that's the lineup construction. That's how it differs from contest to contest. It's not just this lineup construction that should change, but also even your player pool itself. I know we talked about that a little bit earlier as well, but if you want to have player pools catered for the kind of contests that you're entering, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And in the large field GPPs, when you have a few guys in that 6K range that are like 1 to 2% owned, I know we mentioned Cam Davis before. Who was it? It was a David Ford, $6,700 that we also used as an example on this live stream. But you throw one of these guys in there, and I know we had the Goddard up and then both of those sub 5%ers, then maybe you don't need a Goddard up, right? If one of your sub 5%ers is a 6K range guy and he's only 1 to 2% owned, then maybe you can play an Aaron Rai as opposed to a Chris Goddard up there. And again, that might be surprising to some people. They may think like, oh, that's way too chalky. It's not. I've been doing this a long time. I obviously track the kind of duplicates that I have on all my kind of lineups. People, for the most part, when they're playing in large field GPPs, get too cute. They hear the buzzwords about differentiation, leverage, all of that from their touts, and they take it to 100 rather than just kind of ramping up their differentiation. You only need to kind of ramp it up to get the differentiation, and you still want to be entering good lineups. And that's why it's dangerous to go too far down that rabbit hole of that differentiation, is because you're giving up projection. You're giving up lineups that are going to be inferior compared to the ones that you're playing against. And I'm not saying that you need to be entering cash lineups, right, to large field GPPs or anything, but your GPP lineups should not be drastically different than your top projecting lineup. Like maybe a couple, 10 points, 15 points at most off of your top projecting lineup, but you shouldn't be entering lineups in the large field GPP for the most part that are like 50 to 70 points off of your optimal score. Like that's just silly. You're going to have some bad results long-term. You might every once in a while spike a victory with that sort of a strategy, but you're also going to have a lot of weeks where you win absolutely nothing back. So you just want to find that fine balance between getting that differentiation and then again going too far with that before. So that's going to be the DFS talk. Now let's go into the prop and the betting side of things. And by the way, if you do have any questions for DFS, I still will go through those, but the main focus for the rest of the live stream will be on that betting side. Before we start talking about what we're doing for round one, just want to remind you guys of how it went for 2025. And I'm one of the few cappers out there, one of the few touts that will fully stand on my results. I have it fully tracked on Pickett. If you guys don't know what Pickett is, they are a public website that tracks all of your bets. Every single bet that I have active, it only shows on there, I think, after they finish. If it doesn't, then hopefully people aren't going on there and stealing my bets before they end up selling, because that would be kind of annoying. But either way, for the year, we are plus 56.2 units last year, which sounds great, right? I mean, that's if you have a 1 unit bankroll, 100 unit bankroll, and you're putting 1 unit per, it means you made 56.2% on your money. That will be the entire stock market. That will be all the big index funds out there. But the crazy part about our results from last year is that they were the worst that we've ever had. The worst. And I'll say that, right? I don't have an issue holding that back. It was the worst year that we've ever had on our golf results, and yet we still made 56.2 units. Fully tracked over there. And again, if you're looking for good results with your golf betting, you're not going to find that with a lot of the industry. There's a reason why they don't have their pages on Pickett fully trackable. There's a reason why they're not showing their results after every single year and how they've done. A lot of them are just end up being losing better. So if you guys are tailing this exposure, just know that it's a little bit different on our channel. We handle things a little bit differently around here than what you're going to find elsewhere. A subscription to my page actually pays back its money long-term, unlike almost all the other websites that you have out there too. So just wanted to throw that out there. We had a pretty decent season. You can see there was some variance in there, right? We had a couple big slates, a couple big weeks, and then you see a little downturn too, right? I'm not immune to a downturn that happens to even some of the best bettors. But then when you have really big weeks and you're able to capitalize on it, you're able to really take advantage of that too. So take advantage of the Patreon page if you guys haven't already become a member. Something else I'm going to throw out there as well is even for the DFS side, guys, my page is so superior to all the other ones out there. It's not even funny. And I'm not even saying that as like a pure opinionated standpoint. It's just pure facts. And we can go through it. My website, by the way, for Golf DFS, it's $30 a month. It's not like it's pennies or anything like that. But compared to all the other Golf DFS websites out there, it's laughable the kind of value that you get on my website as opposed to all the other ones out there. So, I mean, I'm not even going to shy away from saying it anymore. If you're somebody that subscribes to some of these other websites, I would highly recommend at least considering canceling one or even 2 of them, because when you have a subscription like you have to my Patreon page, you get everything you need for your fantasy process. And again, that's $30 a month. All the shots gained metrics, all the modeling that you need. You have my player pool to reference to, all the shots gained metrics, course history, you name it. You've got websites out there. Again, we're not going to name any names here or anything that are $60 to $150 a month just for their golf DFS stuff. That's double to even 4 to 5 times the price of what I have to offer. And they have half-assed products for half the stuff that they're doing. They don't do course breakdowns. They don't do full showdown content. A lot of them will just like post their plays for a slate and post projections and then just assume that their members get it. With me, you get live streams for every single slate. You get help Q&A for every single slate on my Discord page and my DMs on Patreon. You get a curated player pool, complete breakdowns, not half-assed breakdowns for every single slate the entire year. Again, for half or even a fifth of the cost that you're going to find elsewhere. And you've got these websites that are trying to upsell you on optimizers, everything in between you could possibly think of just to try and squeeze out more money from their people. That's not what you have with me. Everything's included on the DFS tier. You get that spreadsheet that I was showing you guys before. And yeah, it is a little bit more expensive this year, but still peanuts compared to what you have around the industry. So I would highly recommend checking it out. And the reason I bring that up is to go back to the prop and the betting side of things. Same thing for the prop and the betting tier, by the way. It's $30 a month, but plus 56.2 units. If you're a $25 unit better, which is pretty modest, most people on my Patreon page are $100 plus unit bettors at this point because of the kind of results that we've had. Then, I mean, think about a $100 unit better. That's plus $5,600. well into the positive on that sort of investment, of course. So that's what differentiates our channel from a lot of the other ones out there, is we're not actively looking to nickel and dime you on everything that we're possibly doing, and we're actually bringing results to the table. And I'm also really excited to announce that this year will be at course on a lot of the big major events on the schedule, and I'm going to be adding to the team for the very first time. This is an announcement that'll become a little bit more official as the year goes on, but I'm planning on making my own full DFS site and having a full team for golf and making my own competing website. So just going to put that out there. If you guys are talent and you maybe want to consider becoming a part of the program and the business, then you can throw your name into the ring and we can talk about maybe what that looks like going forward. But that's the kind of vision that we have on the Patreon page. Obviously, it won't be on Patreon when that's the case. It will be our own full-blown website, that sort of thing. But we're building in, this is what I think the best channel and the best website is for all of PGA DFS out there. So I would be remiss not to mention the kind of results that we've had and the reasons why you guys should join. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Let's talk about some improvements from our prop and the betting side. So the one thing that I did with the devs on BetTheNumber over this offseason, which speaking of, not even just the Patreon page that we're looking to actively improve, but working with some of my partners like BetTheNumber to further give you guys even better products and even better analysis on the prop side of things. And look what they delivered. I mean, in terms of stat averages, you're not going to find a database in the world that has a more detailed database than what you guys have right here. It's the last 9 years at the Sony Open. We've got score on there. That's round score. It's been a par 70 the entire time. Birdies are better. Pars per round. You got bogeys are worse over there as well. Fairways and greens. And you guessed it, it's not just the Sony Open. It is every single event on the schedule. We got the last 8 to 9 years, as many years of sample size as we have at these golf courses to further aid our research. And if you scroll down here towards the bottom, by the way, guys, I would highly recommend signing up for BetTheNumber if you guys haven't already as well. If you're making your own bets, of course, my Patreon page is where you guys can tell what I'm entering myself. But because I'm so big on process and teaching you guys how to find prop value for yourselves, a lot of the people that are members for my channel love having a database and a website like this to do their own research for themselves. Code Gsluke, by the way, if you guys are signing up for BetTheNumber to get access to some of these kind of tools. But if you scroll down here towards the bottom, you have some more distribution info on some of the averages that we were going through before. But this is what I really, really, really like about the change. The stat averages were stuff that I was able to do before. Like I did it by hand. Them changing that, though, is going to save me a lot of time. So God bless to Ben and the team for being able to do that for us. However, when we take a look at the relevant field stats tab down here, we can set this to whatever kind of sample size we want, and we can sort the field. We can see the best players in any given category. So this is just something I wanted to throw out there because it is such a useful tool for the season. But like if you go to the last 12 measured rounds, we go to birdie average, we can see who got hot during the fall swing and who was making the most birdies or better per round. Patrick Rogers, number one, that's surprising to me. I was not expecting to see that. But, guys like a Ben Griffin, he killed it. He had his win, his last start on tour. Ricky Castillo, Patton Kizzire also had a really good fall swing. You can see how this would be extremely valuable for all of your prop research. So wanted to throw that out there right off the bat. Did want to show you guys some of these stat averages as well. And to circle back to the conditions that we're expecting for Thursday, it's going to be a much harder year than normal. I mean, usually the scoring average is between -1 to -1.5, but with close to 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts in the afternoon, I don't think it's going to be like that tomorrow. And to go back to these averages, there was one year that we kept going back to that I think is going to have similar types of averages to what we have this year. And that would be in 2020, where you can see it actually played 0.5 over par. Your birdie average was only 3.03. You had 2.94 bogeys or worse per round. And by the way, if it played 0.5 over par, that means that there were a lot of double bogeys or worse, right? If that were to be the case for that math to end up equating out there. But the fairway average, this is what was really surprising to me, at least. The fairway average was the highest that it ever was that year, but the green average, as you would expect in windier conditions and with a harder golf course, was the lowest that it ever was that year. And the course has gotten some rain over the last couple of days. That was the case in 2020 as well. It was a wet and a windy golf course. I think that these 2020 averages are exactly what we're going to get this year. I think they're by far their most useful averages that we're going to have. And you can see, compared to all the other years that we have on here, significantly lower birdie average, 0.7 to even an entire birdie lower. And then the bogey or worse average is 0.5 to 0.7 higher, depending on what, actually even an entire birdie bogey or worse higher, compared to what we had with these 2 years. Pretty drastic stuff from season to season. So it's good to have these sort of metrics to go through, and not even just to have like 9 years worth of data to go through. We can see what different years look like. Like we can see what an easy year at this golf course looks like. For that, right? Look at 2021, the year after it played really difficult, but the year before that, we can get the shots gained metrics and the data on what a difficult year looks like at Waialae Country Club. So I like that quite a bit. And because the conditions look pretty difficult, I'm looking at some PM wave fades. So if you guys have seen my X/Twitter, this one was already posted over there. And this is going to be the 2-man that we are tailing for round number 1. It's not a great payout. It's 2.5x, which it's plus 150 essentially. That's dog shit, by the way. I'm not even going to mince my words on it. The payouts that these websites give are criminal. However, I do think that both of these are line value. So you've got the over on Max McGreevy, who's teeing off towards the very late end of tee times. That's when the winds are really going to become a problem. And I think the scoring average, and I'll give the predicted scoring average right now, I think it's going to be between even par and maybe a half a stroke under. And the only reason I have it easier than 2020 is because of all the rain that they're getting today. It's going to be a softer golf course tomorrow. Heck, it might even be lift clean in place. So that's why I would say even par to maybe minus 0.5. But even if it plays like 0.5 under par, McGreevy has to gain 1.5 to 2 strokes to the field to push the 68 number. And McGreevy did play really well during the fall swing. So respect to him for, being one of the maybe top 10 players during that part of the schedule, but he was playing against slapdicks. It's the fall series for a reason. There's a reason why Russell Henley and Ben Griffin didn't bother showing up more than once during the fall swing. It's not the same level of golf. And for us to think that he's just going to sustain that level of golf is, I think, a bit silly. So he's at 68.5 on a lot of books. We obviously have the push equity at -2 in our pocket. And he's got to shoot -3 to go under this sort of number. And, a -3 might even be gaining 3 strokes to the field. It's just asking way too much from a Max McGreevy. So he has a lot more over equity than under equity, hence why we're on that sort of a spot. And then on the other side of it, let's go to the Hideki Matsuyama one. To go back to the average from 2020, that was 11.6 greens regulation per round. I'm putting the average, at least for round 1, at about 12 per round. The reason why I have it a little bit higher is the AM is not going to be as bad. So that's part of it there. But also because of the rain that they're getting today, it is going to be a slightly softer golf course. So if the average is going to be about 12 per round, it still has me on this under on Hideki Matsuyama, as he ranked number 130 on the PGA Tour when it came to hitting greens last year. And that was sandwiched with wins on both sides of his year. He had him on the Hero and his first event of the year at the Century Tournament of Champions. And despite being a big gainer on approach for the entire season, number 130 out of like 175 players on the PGA Tour. So well below average in that category. And while I'm not going to call him a below average iron player in this field, because you have to also realize that Hideki was playing in signature events, major championships, the harder golf courses. So that has to do with why he's number 130, but let's call him an average to slightly above average iron player. And again, maybe that's even being nice to him, right? Because we're trying to adjust for the kind of fields he's playing in, but that might even be an over adjustment, saying that he's an above average iron player. Even an above average iron player is maybe projecting for like 12.25 to 12.5 greens reg per round if it's going to be about a 12 average. So at 13 with the push equity there, it is clear value towards the under, because he has to get to 14 to go over, which could be 2 to even 2.5 greens in regulation gain to the field, which for somebody, again, who ranked number 130 out of like 175 players on tour is just a little bit too much of an ask. And there's no lines on the sports books to compare to on that one. So we're kind of flying in the dark when it comes to that sort of a lean. But even if we didn't have the line on McGreevy at 68.5, right, with that 0.5 value, I still would have entered this 2-leg combo. And when I was first into betting props, I didn't look at the plus EV stuff whatsoever. And I had some of my best results I've ever had in my career. Plus EV analysis can be useful in some cases, but traditional analysis, in particular for round number 1 of golf tournaments, is always the way to go. And I will stand behind that. Round number 1, the sports books know as much about the golf course as us. They can see the interviews. Maybe they have somebody on site that's giving them some information about like the rough and maybe the firmness of the greens. But for the most part, they have the same amount of information as we do. So to act like they have this crystal ball and they know exactly what's going to happen ahead of time is foolish. So when you can find value like this, and you can find it from the traditional analysis perspective, do not be afraid to do it for round number 1. Now, after the stats come in and we have a distribution from round 1 to use for the round 2 handicapping process, you start to trust the plus EV stuff just a little bit more. But for round 1, and especially the first event of an entire season, I kind of throw that out and don't look at it whatsoever. And even if you do look at the plus EV stuff so far, it agrees with our take on Max McGreevy, and it agrees with fades for the most part on the guys that you have on this sort of a board. So that's going to be the 2-leg slip that we take on the PrizePicks side. On Underdog, I actually only had one prop that I played over there. I have a gimme prop that I played on Underdog that I was able to pair it up with, but it's a Siwoo Kim over on bogeys. So let's type Siwoo in so I can show you guys what that looks like. It's an over at 1.5 bogeys or worse. It's a slightly worse number now. I got a better multiplier earlier today, obviously with me posting it on my Patreon page and a lot of my members hammering that sort of in action. Sometimes the multipliers on these will change a little bit by the time we get to the live stream here. But Siwoo Kim, he won this event a few years ago, 2023. Even when he won this at -18, this is crazy, he went over this in 3 or 4 rounds. So for me, this is like an obvious spot, especially with a PMT time tomorrow. He's going to be on the harder side of conditions. And even when things went perfectly for him at this sort of a golf course, he was going over this 75% of the time. So even though there's a multiplier on it and you are paying for it with the payouts, it's worth it, in my opinion. And especially when you're somebody like myself that had that gimme, as I was saying before. If you don't know how that works, by the way, if you have a prop that's rescued on Underdog and your slip hits with everything except for that line, they end up giving you a free gimme to use on another slip. With the gimme, there's no correlation rules. So I was able to throw in the gimme for 0 and get a full 2.49x payout on this, which is essentially plus 150, which is the same payout that we got on PrizePicks before. That's just for the one prop that we have with Siwoo Kim. So that was something that I posted on the Patreon page a little bit earlier on as well. But we don't just cover Underdog and PrizePicks on the prop and the betting side. We have the bets, like I was saying before. We have the Nico Echeverria, also the Matt McCarty bets that I threw out there for free. Also Keegan Bradley, Aaron Rye, we mentioned a little bit earlier on as well. But there's 5 other outright bets that I've mixed in. But we also bet these round by round head-to-head markets. So truly all the exposure you guys could possibly think of, we cover on the Patreon page. And the reason for that, it's beautiful, is that I live in Florida. We've got the sports books, we've got the pick'em sites to choose from, we've got Sleeper, we've got Better, literally every website you could pretty much possibly think of, except for Draftkings and Fanduel, we can bet down here in Florida. So this bet on Eric Cole, I have a severe value at -115. And the reason for this is Eric Cole is first off the favorite in the 3-ball between him, Zach Blair, and I forget who the third player is, but he's the big favorite out of those 3 players. And if you take a look at the shots gained metrics over the last few months, let's actually go ahead and do that together over here on BetTheNumber. So this is another tool on BetTheNumber that I absolutely love and that I use all the time for my analysis. But if we go over here and we type in both players, we can get a direct comparison on all these important different stat categories over the last 24 rounds. And although both of these guys played during the fall swing, Eric Cole was the better player, and Zach Blair was playing like the best golf that he's played in the last 2 years. And even with that, Eric Cole was better. And if you take a look at the longer term stuff, like the last 100 or the last 200 rounds, Eric Cole is absolutely lapping Zach Blair. And the thing is, Eric Cole plays a much tougher strength of schedule than Zach Blair. Eric Cole plays as much as humanly possible, the small events and the big events included. Zach Blair, on the other hand, pretty much only plays in the slapstick tier events. So for Eric Cole to be the better player long-term, to be the clear favorite in those 3-ball odds as well, on sites like DraftKings and Underdog, it just makes no sense for a site like Hard Rock Bet to have him at -115. And, you know, it's not plus 100, right? That would be true even money odds, but that's the kind of juice that they attach to everything on Hard Rock Bet. It's just -110, -115 on pretty much everything. If he's going to be pretty much priced at 50-50 for something that should be priced at 60 to even 65% in his favor, there's going to be obvious value in attacking that. And that's the kind of market that I look at on Hard Rock Bet. Hard Rock Bet is a smaller sports book than what we have at DraftKings and FanDuel. They obviously don't have as substantial of a team to go out there and put together their prop boards, and they make a lot of mistakes on these kind of a head-to-heads. And by the way, this one is the tie no bets. So if you're looking on how to find that one, you have to click on the matchup. So that's the one right there. And then you click this to bring down the tie no bets, because if you were to just to bet them with the tie included, the odds would be a little bit different. But, you know, there's nothing more tilting than having guys tie and then the sports book taking your money. So although it doesn't look as pretty as that plus 105 payout, just pay the extra juice and go to the -115. But that's an example of the kind of betting exposure you guys can find on the Patreon page as well. But that's all I've got in terms of exposure to tail for round one. We're going to go through any questions, deep dives that you guys have for me in the live chat. If there's any bets or even any questions on the DFS side that we didn't get to before, go ahead, let me know in the chat and we'll go ahead and do so now. But the main thing I'll say, guys, is check out the Patreon page if you guys haven't already. If you guys want to tail the plus 56.2 units that we had last year, again, that's a down year for us. As crazy as that sounds, a plus 23.27% ROI on all of our slips is a quote unquote down year on our channel. You know we're doing something right. So prop tiers, how you guys get access to all those bets that we just went through. And there's a lot more I've already entered at this point. So obviously, if you join that, you guys can get the rest of the exposure for round one for your tailing purposes. And then the DFS tier, the golf DFS tier, is how you guys get the spreadsheet that we went through before. That's with all the DFS projections, ownership on there, my entire player pool for all that. And by the way, if you do both, let's say you play DFS and you're somebody that bets and play these props, the golf full tier is what you guys want for that. Well, let me get back to, I was going to try and find the averages, but let's do that so that we can go through that when we're going through these questions. Where did we leave off? You like yourself some Waialae. I do too, actually. He plays these coastal courses well, and he's a good Bermuda grass putter as well. So I'm going to have some of my exposure. He said you play against 8 other people at work, and for each tournament, he said, this is your first time doing golf. What do I recommend you start? Well, that's a good question. So if it's your first time really doing golf stuff, you want to get an idea of the kind of scoring that you're dealing with. So if you're on a Draftkings, you want to kind of figure out what scores on Draftkings. A lot of that comes down to birdies, because different websites, there'll be pull websites where it's just all about your positioning. You want to research that first, figure out what you're trying to optimize on. And then the PGA Tour website, which actually, let me bring that up for you right here. PGA Tour website is one of the very few sports leagues in the world that has extremely detailed stat keeping, and it's all for free that they have on their website. So if you go to pgatour.com, you click on stats at the top, it's going to bring you to the page that we're looking at right now. And the reason I say that is you want to look at the scoring, right? And let's say it's the most birdies made that you have to choose. Then you want to go over here to scoring. You want to click on something like birdie or better percentage, and then use the stats from 2025 to help you out with that research. But maybe it's just a DFS lineup that you guys are building. I'm not sure the format that you're talking about. But if you're brand new to golf, you've got a lot of research to start, man. It's a sport that's extremely deep. A lot of passionate fans like myself that do research for all these different events, but you found a good spot to start. Subscribe to the channel. It might be a little bit over your head at first. There's a lot of technical talk that we have here on the channel, but I'll do my best to make it as beginner friendly as possible for all of you guys out there, because I'm sure you're not the only one that's new to this, right? Obviously, football is around. Some people are looking to maybe get into golf for the first time. I'd highly recommend it. It's probably the best sweat that we have in all of DFS. There's a lot of heartbreak involved with golf, a lot of crazy stuff that happens, but that's also what makes it so much fun to play. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We cover a lot of stuff here for free. It's not just before every event like we have here on this live stream, but for rounds 2 through 4, we do showdown live streams. That's the single game fantasy golf. We do that for rounds 2 through 4, and we cover props and bets for rounds 2 through 4 here. So if you're trying to learn what fantasy golf is all about and how to generate an edge, depending on the kind of contest that you're entering in, watching those sort of videos and those sort of live streams will probably start to help you out with that kind of a thing. So you're in the right place, and any questions, do not be shy at all. We'll go over him here. We'll go over them together. I'm a little rusty with the voice here, too, guys. Bear with me just a little bit. Thoughts on Kurt over Pendrith in a matchup? So if you're talking about a head-to-head matchup and there are plus 100 for either side, the odds, of course, are really important on those. So if you could attach that the next time you give me a head-to-head, that would be great. But if we're talking about a pure plus 100 in either scenario, Kurt Kitayama is the higher floor player. He played better during the fall swing. Pendrith, I mean, he's a winner on tour. He's played, I shouldn't say that. He's a very good player on tour, somebody that's going to be a multiple-time tour winner someday. However, Kurt's already reached that level. He's been a lot more consistent over the last 3 to 4 months. So yeah, if it's plus 100, you're giving me even money on either side. I'm taking Kurt Kitayama, but I'm assuming the odds are probably in that direction, right? He's probably minus 130, minus 135. You'll have to let me know. Are you too late for the prop stuff? You aren't. You were just in time. No props starting now, just in time. That is correct. Let's go. You just realized that we start tomorrow. Yeah, it's a later start tomorrow. It's about noon, but you've got enough time to get all of your research in. He said, this isn't like football. That is true. This is golf. I said, hey, Luke, are you entering anything for Eurogolf tonight? Yeah, I have a prop in there for it. I took an over on birdies for somebody at 4, but you can check that out on the Patreon page as a piece of exposure. I did that. He said, you can't fake golf as a tour pro, and if they do, it'll stick out terribly. I agree with you on that one. I think golf is something that is harder to break down. It takes a lot more time to kind of learn the process. And like everyone in high school knows football, right? Like everyone plays fantasy football. kind of knows football to some extent. Can't do that with golf, right? Like there's a much steeper learning curve involved with that. So I agree with you on that. You took McGreevy out of all of your lineups. Anyone that Luke thinks is a slapdick is not a man I want to associate with. I hope it works out for us because I'm 0% there too. But yeah, I don't know. He's a good fall series player, right? We say that about some guys. It's like when you like Pan Kazire, for example, you would never want him at like a signature field event. It's just not going to happen. Okay. However, you put him in like PGA National with a slapdick field in the Florida swing, then yeah, he might get you a top 10 or top 20 in that sort of event. In my opinion, he's that kind of guy. I've been wrong about guys plenty of times before. So let's not act like I'm going to be 100% right about that. But yeah, that's my take on him. He's just kind of a guy. You said you feel like it's hard to stay away from Griffin because he's so good on Bermuda. I agree with you on that. I was actually looking at a Russell Henley over at 4.5 birdies. I know you had the question about Ben Griffin before, right? Yeah, at 4.5 birdies. Henley was minus 150 towards the over. And you've got to keep in mind that I bet Russell Henley this week. Actually, I didn't bet. He's one of my core plays, but I almost bet him outright this week. He was like plus 1,000 or something. And he's plus like 1,200 on the other books. So I did end up pulling the trigger on that outright myself. But either way, he's essentially my favorite play that we have in this field. And even with the minus 150 odds, and that's the plus EV value that the sports we're talking about, I did not place that myself. If that doesn't kind of give you the vibe of getting on this sort of a slate, then I don't know what will, right? Like if I'm not willing to take my favorite player with plus EV value at that sort of number, then I probably wouldn't take Ben Griffin either. So that's just because I think the conditions are going to be a little bit harder this year. And we didn't go into as much detail on this earlier, but I heard from a few players on sites, names are going to stay anonymous on this one, that the rough is a lot longer than normal, like a lot longer. It's 4 inches long and it's wet now. And the person that I got the information from, you could probably guess who it is, to be honest with you. If you're following the channel long enough, you already know who it is. But he said it was impossible to reach the greens with a wedge out of the rough. I think it's going to play pretty difficult for round number one, and especially on that PM wave side. So Henley, Griffin, they are AM waves. So that's the one saving grace there, but I couldn't do it myself, man. It was just a little bit too sketchy. Who do I got winning this weekend? I'll go over a couple names I've got winning, but I've got 9 on my card. Nico Echeverria, Matt McCarty were a few ones I've already thrown out there. Aaron Rye, and then Keegan Bradley. A few names that I have on my short list, but it's a hard event to kind of narrow down a winner, I'd say. It's a more volatile golf course. It's not one where we have a lot of like multiple time winners over the last 10 to 15 years. So I think it's wide open. I think if you got anyone that's like 40, 50 to 1, even 100 to 1 that you think has a shot, then sprinkle them for an outright. It's that sort of event. So don't worry, you made sure to leave them in your 50-cent one so you could see what would happen. Good. That's always good to do, right? At least have some exposure out there. It might not mean anything. You might win like $5 on your 50-cent lineups, but we'll see. You said if you get first in your 50-cent lineup, you'll be upset. Yeah, you would have reason to be upset if that were to be the case. But that's all we've got, guys. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel as per usual here. Check out the Patreon page if you guys haven't already for all the content throughout 2026. But I'm thoroughly looking forward to having some golf action to sweat out this weekend. We got a cut line, 120 players. Heck, we even have showdown streams, prop streams over the next few days to go through as well. So subscribe. Make sure you guys stop on by for all those live streams over the next few days. And let's have ourselves a weekend.